Hello, amigo gardens, and welcome to what we're calling the Wormhole 2.0, episode 1. This week we'll be talking about super soil. We have the Pharmacy Seed Network, we have my friend Smiley's Gardens, and Medically Fit, who's been around for quite some time. Looking forward to hearing your guys' knowledge and your thoughts on super soil, like we're going to talk about this week.
Yeah, looking forward to this.
Very excited.
Right on. So I guess the first and obvious question is why use super soil? Artificial nutrients can be so cheap and kind of easy to micromanage when things go awry. Why should we choose super soil? I guess that'd be the first question.
Well, there's a lot to that answer. A lot of what we look at versus synthetic and organic. A lot of the bottled nutrient stuff that we're dealing with is synthetic, as where a lot of, how do I describe it?
I got a fast answer to that.
Answer it.
Because people win competitions with it all the time. That's one reason. Because it can kick the crap out of other techniques.
But you can say that the same thing about bottled nutrients. I've seen people win many times, hands down, even using synganics or synthetic organic combination.
True.
But I look at it as I want to give my plants a full range of spectrum of food to choose from. I don't want part A, part B. I want stuff that like kelp that has 60 to 70 vitamins, nutrients, minerals. I have to be careful of heavy metals, but I want like tricantanol. I want alfalfa, so I'm looking for the tricantanol. I don't get a lot of this stuff from bottled nutrients. So that's why I look at doing a super soil base where I can get a lot of these natural plant growth regulators to help my plants. I'm giving them a full spectrum of different foods. Even I use azomite or rock dust because our plants need those trace minerals. Even if it's a 1/10 of a nanogram of lead or arsenic, the plants use it and they need it for key functions. And a lot of our bottled nutrients don't have that stuff. They're finding a lot of the bottled nutrients are higher in heavy metals compared to some of these organic amendments. When we're looking at organic amendments, we're also looking at carbon. These are carbon sources. And what's one of the key nutrients that Nick from Rooted Leaf talks about? Carbon. So we are getting a carbon source of nutrients with our down to earth, our dry organic amendments versus these bottled nutrients, which are a liquid type feed. There's no carbon to them. Absolutely. So there's a lot of answers to it. There are a lot of answers.
And those trace minerals and those other pieces that you were talking about are all enzyme cofactors. So those unlock all sorts of metabolic and biological processes that are super important. And it's really about elevating the health of a plant so that it can defend itself from the environment better. And in elevating its health, you can get further up that plant health pyramid and develop higher levels of cannabinoids, terpenoids, and all of those medicinal compounds that we're ultimately seeking from the plant. And that's not just for cannabis, by the way, that's for food too.
Well, it's not just for that, it's for our own personal health.
Absolutely.
Because I did a video a while back, did Subcool have it right? When Subcool used super soil, did he have it right by using this style of growing? Because look at everything you're getting from super soil. As humans, we need these essential vitamins and nutrients, these trace elements for key homeostasis in our body, for hormone balancing and regulation and enzyme breakdown and all of this stuff. We need just as well as the plants. So for us to go, oh, our plants don't need that, they've been growing just fine without it. Well, they're not really healthy, and it's been proven.
They're pre-diseased is what they are, just like most of us humans are who aren't aware of nutrition and enzymes.
Autoimmune diseases and getting sick all the time because we're not eating healthy and we're eating a lot of fast food and processed foods and not natural, self-grown or, fresh fruits and vegetables. And like, it's okay to eat meat. And there's a lot of great diets around just meat that people are getting really healthy from, but it's not processed meat. It's grown from a local grower that they know that they're not putting these antibiotics or hormones when they're feeding their cattle. And
that's right. And then I just heard a thing from Advancing Eco Agriculture, one of their latest podcasts. They were talking about the difference in omega-3 fatty acids between grass-fed beef and grain-fed beef. And it's like 20 times the amount. It is a massive difference. And they've tested across multiple different testing zones. And now they're expanding that testing range. And it's like the results are really incredible. And that has an effect on health. And if you listen to like somebody like Dr. Andrew Huberman, he goes on about omega-3 and brain health and heart health and cardiovascular health. And I could go on and on just about all these pieces, both in the human body and in the plant soil system. So you're right.
So think about when the farmers actually used to let their cattle eat their hemp plants. Their hemp, the cannabinoids, the
Sure.
omega-3s from the hemp all went into the cattle, and the farmers and their family got that through the meat. They're not getting that now because they're not allowing the cattle to eat these hemp plants or seed or anything. And so we're seeing a lot more probiotics to this meat. We're seeing a lot more different ways to, how do I want to say it, try to make the meat where it's consumable and not labeled as non-consumable for human consumption.
So try to get back on track. What's you guys' recipe or what's a good recipe for super soil possibly that might happen out there?
Well, that's a good question.
To the topic.
Because if you look at Subcool's original recipe, he actually changed things over the years and added and took some things away. So each person, I recommend trying an original recipe and then changing things on what works for you, because we know a lot of people are getting away from stuff in high metals like kelp. What's another one? Azomite, they say, is high in aluminum and different heavy metals. So people are looking to get rid of those amendments in their super soil mixes and trying to find stuff that doesn't have these heavy metals, especially growing for large grows that you have to have the testing.
So talking about like azomite, which is like a rock dust, I know there's when I was mixing soil there, I used a website called Rock Dust Local, and I was researching it, and they were a premier source. Like the guy does testing on and he gets different sources of this mineral. They actually had a package of a microfine basalt in I think it was like St. George's black or something. It was more of a black, and it was more of a grainier type rock to it or whatever. But with some of those, there are sources to try to get away from some of the aspects of the recipe if you want to try to avoid, like what you're saying. Okay, so you think azomite has a problem, then you can substitute, and you can bring in a different source to try to accomplish that piece of the mix.
And that's what I think a lot of people need to do, Smiley, is look at the resourcing of some of these products just to make sure they're not testing. Most of them have some type of MA or MDA type data sheet that tells what's in their products, that you can actually go to their either website or ask
material safety
for them to send this information to you. Yep, little safety data.
Yep.
And so that's how you're able to look to see what they're finding in their tests and their products to help you be able to sort through it.
And I ordered from Rock Dust Local also their basalt and their ruby red granite mixes, and they come with an MSDS sheet, so you can actually see what the percentages are of everything. Pretty cool trace mineral mix, and that's what I've been using for probably 10 years now, and that's worked great for me.
Now back to, if you're trying to do a super soil recipe, man, I've got a couple different ones that I've used over the years where I've took stuff out and I've added stuff. Like I never used to use langbonite, but Now I'm using it in some of my recipes. And how do I feel about it? I can't tell that I notice much of a difference.
What's langbeinite?
Langbeinite is like a magnesium sulfate in a sense. It's got some copper in it. It's mainly magnesium, where it's soluble. It's almost all soluble. As soon as you put it in water, it dissolves. And the base purpose is it's got some sulfur to it, I think, as well.
Right. So,
Yep. And so instead of using Epsom salts, people can use langbeinite. But some people say if you look at the synergesic aspect of how nutrients work together or don't work together, they try to say magnesium and calcium don't quite work together like that. So using langbeinite with like gypsum, some people don't do that because they say there's adverse effects there. But I don't quite believe that. In nature, Mother Nature makes everything work the best way possible. So
let's not, in this conversation, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but in this conversation, let's definitely not leave out the most important role here is the biology. The biology is the exchanger for all of these other processes between it. And that's like what super soil is truly about, is the biology in it. Go ahead. Right.
Because you're feeding the biology to feed your plants. And now that we know from Dr. James White about rhizophagy cycle, where the plants are actually shooting out biology out of the root tips to consume and then bring them back in and take it up. They're carnivorous and they are eating the bacteria outer walls of their body and then kind of spitting them out. But we're trying to feed both the biology, because not all biology is going to break down all the nutrients. And so that's another topic. But getting back to super soil, man, I want as much diversity for that biology to consume and break down. And, I don't want to be like, oh, I'm just going to give it some of this or some of that, like plan A, plan B. And I want to have a smorgasbord. I want to go to an all-you-can-eat buffet and eat everything that they have available. Because if I'm limited and those products are limited on the amount of nutrients that each one has, then I'm restricting my plant from the availability of what it needs.
Yeah, and like you were talking, magnesium and calcium, those are antagonistic to each other, like along with potassium. There's sort of a balance and a dichotomy you want to have kept between calcium, magnesium, and potassium. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're mixing that. So yeah, you want it there, but you want it in a proportion and have an idea of what that's going to be, not just adding it in. So.
Well, and that's the bad thing is all of us try to think we know what the plant needs. None of us really do. When we're doing bottle feeding, we're force feeding our plant to uptake the nutrients that we have available. Where super soil, it's kind of eat as you want and eat when you want.
Yeah.
Well, not all these ingredients are bioavailable at the same time. I mean, so how long you need to think, and how do some amendments need to be put in before others? I mean, do they all have to be mixed at once? Do some come into play later? I mean, let's talk a little bit about the when to add and what to add.
So when you're doing a normal super soil mix, you're kind of mix everything in together to allow it to break down together. You're allowing 30 to 45 days, which is ample time for everything to be broken down into an available form, or the biology to start breaking it down. If you're doing top dressings, that's going to be dependent on what stage you're in, if you're still in veg or flour. But usually it takes 2 to 3 weeks, almost 21 days for some of these to break down and become available. So if your plant's showing signs of nutrient deficiency, say nitrogen, and you want to throw some blood meal in there, well, you don't want to do that at day 35 of flower. You're going to have so much excessive nitrogen in your soil when it's trying to finish up that you're going to have green leaves and it's not going to taste right.
Let me also just briefly make the point that if you're showing that nitrogen deficiency, you've been deficient for 2-3 weeks, a month. So you're now a month and a half into it before you've corrected that.
So that what I'm hearing is a takeaway too is you want to watch what is soluble and insoluble, and that's going to be a good idea of what's going to be like. The ones that are listed as soluble are going to be absorbed in water and carried it like where the water is. The ones that are insoluble will require more of a biological activity to get available.
Broken down. Yeah, and I talk about that quite a bit, making my videos, looking at the product on back. It will say soluble, insoluble. It may be 2% of the product is soluble, but when I make an amendment tea, I still will take that 2% solubility over 0.
Yep.
Because even that trace amount is going to be a benefit of a plant food or a biology food for the biology or my plants. But the insoluble part that the water is not breaking down, even soaking 24, 48 hours, that's the insolubility of it that now I've got to either top dress or throw it in my compost pile, let it break down, because right now I have a big clump of dry organic amendments that what am I going to do with after I made a tea?
Yeah, or mix it in with something to give it some biology and give it some time to cook down. Like you need that action.
And as far as like the mixing of the super soil, I always like to go about the compost and the peat moss at the same time and get those mixed in well, and then trying to add in amendments afterwards. And then as I did different mixes, this was something that I kind of adjusted, but the aeration portion of it can be pretty heavy depending on what you're using, rocks or whatever. Sand, perlite, maybe not so much. But I was thinking later as I'm mixing it, because I was doing it on a tarp, so I would lay all this stuff out, spread it out as far as I could on this big tarp, and then I would pull each corner and flip it in on each other, and then I'd spread it back out. And you just do that until it's mixed in evenly, or you start to get a feel that it's even. And then mixing your amendments, you're doing the same thing. Well, if your aeration's in there right away, you're mixing that along with it, which you got to mix it in there, you do. But if you're not going to have to pull it as often, because you're still going to have to pull them corners and scrape that out. So I started adding the aeration portion at the last, and that way I could try to get a better feel for the mix, or I could even get my hands in there without, having rocks tear it up. So.
Well, and some of the concern when mixing super soil is you're not getting the amendments fully mixed through the soil. And so you have higher amounts in different parts of the soil. And so that's where a lot of people will start seeing some issues like, hey, my plants are looking like they're nutrient deficient, or my soil looks like it's too hot. And what's hot soil? Well, hot soil means it's like your compost, because it's trying to break down. The biology's there. It's getting up to 100 and some degrees down there to help break everything down, and it's active. And so it can cause problems in the root zone for your plants to grow in hot soil. Not always. Some plants can handle it, but not all plants.
You know what I used to have in the farm when I had the greenhouse was a cement mixer, and that was an awesome way to mix soil. I miss that, man. I'll pick another one up at some point, I'm sure, because that was.
I have a lot of people tell me I should get a little portable cement mixer to make it, but when you're making it in the volume I do, that cement mixer does not do the volume.
Yeah, I know. You need like a huge mixer.
I need a semi truck for the volume that we do.
Yeah, you need a soil processing plant.
Yes.
So what you're talking about too with that hot soil, that has a lot to do with the carbon to nitrogen ratio, just like in a compost pile. So if you want to avoid that, that's going to be in your nitrogen portion that you're going to want to dial that back. Usually when they're a little high in that, that's where you'll start to get that kickoff of that thermophilic portion of the compost going. And the super soil, even though I haven't run that much, it's my understanding that's why you would mix that soil, because it does have a heavy load of nutrient and nitrogen in it. You want to mix that and leave it sit and do its thing, kind of composting, and it's going to go through that kind of heat cycle, cool down, and that's when you're really supposed to have it, ready to use for you. But up until then, initially mixing it, yeah, it could heat up the first time you get it wet. You know what I mean? So you want to almost get it wet, let it do its thing for 90 days, and then pull it out and use it. Was my understanding of some of that.
It can heat up, it can gas off and put off some pretty nasty odors. And the other thing, like to your point about nitrogen and heat, like you can take a fresh pile of wood chips and put ammonia on it, and that thing will get really hot really fast because of that carbon nitrogen ratio thing. Again, wood chips mostly carbon, yeah, the ammonia, which is all nitrogen, poof, it gets really hot, and it can actually catch fire with that. So just to make another illustration of your point.
Well, and we got to keep in mind too, compost. Some of it's hot. Like when we're looking at doing some of our compost, making sure our brown to green ratios, it's kind of the same thing doing super soil. It's you got your base soil and then your super soil. And your super soil is going to be hotter than the base, but we got to layer things and mix things up so we're not going all in the super soil, because if we do all super soil, we're going to have so much nutrients for some of them plants. You could probably run a full year on a 10-gallon pot with all super soil before it starts to run out. But we're not trying to grow directly in super soil. We're trying to do a base where we have just a base soil of not really much nutrients, and then a layer of super soil that it can grow into to tap in to find those nutrients. And that's where some of the things like explaining growing with super soil, Sub used to talk a lot about doing layering or putting, the super soil on the bottom and then your base at the top so it can grow down and find food. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that enough.
And that's a very good point. And that's exactly what we do in regenerative agriculture in the field too, with cover cropping. We're sequestering carbon and biology in that soil. And we should be studying and mimicking nature. If we want to make the best soil and grow the best crops, study and mimic nature, man. That's so important.
Well, and that's where I think if you're going to do a no-till bed, like a grassroots bed or something like that, starting off with a good super soil base or super soil mix to get everything started and get your diversity and cover crop to get the diversity in biology. I think that's one way to really get it started to pop off, and then gradually add different cover crop over the years to get different amendments back in your soil. But the one thing that we're always going to have a hard time putting back in is calcium. Like plants don't produce calcium as it breaks down. There's not really calcium available there. And so that's one of the things as a super soil we have to kind of re-amend when we're re-amending our soils for sure.
Yep. And we want that to be available but not soluble, right? Like ideally we want the biology to go and grab that off the exchange sites when the plant needs it, at the behest of the plant due to the exudates the plant's producing. That's what we really want to do with that.
Well, and some of the calcium forms have different covalent bonds that they have to be broken down a little differently. Like dolomite lime is a little different than gypsum, or an apple cider vinegar eggshell calcium extract is way different, and that's more readily available and not have to be broke down. So there's different forms. I mean, look at crustacean meal and oyster shell as two sources. That takes a while to break down.
Yeah,
but that is a calcium carbonate.
Yeah. But those are awesome nutrients. If you give them the time and provide the biology, man, they really, they produce tremendous effects, and they have long lasting effects. I'm always super impressed with those products.
You guys jumping way ahead here. We're already into amendments and biology and all that. We haven't even started with what should they start with? What should they? I mean, what is a good base? I mean, should they be trying from scratch, or is there good across the board you can get anywhere base?
I think that there's a couple good bases that people can do, because it's an expensive product line to buy everything, period. Literally, if I'm buying everything in my super soil mix, it's $300 to $400. Yep. Each box ranges price difference from $7 to $12 for one nutrient up to $20 to $30 for another one. So it depends on the amendments themselves. But a lot of people look at these BioLife products that have a mixture already done to them with a little bit of biology. So like their kelp meal, BioLife kelp, stuff like that. People look at doing that because it has like 4 or 5 already kind of mixed in with some mycorrhiza, endo and ecto, a little bit of glomulus, some bacillus, I think, in it. So that's a good base. But if you're really trying to spend a little money, have some, there's a good probably 7 to 8 products that I would just say, hey, spend that $150, get these products, because you can use them to make teas, you can use them to top dress, where you're not limiting yourself so much on one product or 2 products. You're having a little bit more variety.
Well, some of these products aren't necessarily, you buy a box of bone meal and stuff like that. It isn't necessarily, that box isn't per recipe. So you get a few, you know what I mean? It might be an initial upfront cost, but some of those would be aided in multiple mixes, correct?
Yes. So a 5-pound box is usually what I get. And a 5-pound box, after I make 3.5 Bell, whatever, Pro Mix, I still have probably half to 2/3 of the box left that will last me a full year or more if I'm making some teas here and there, if I'm having to remake a soil. So out of a box, I could probably do 3 full bales of super soil. So it lasts way longer than a lot of these bottled nutrients. So if you're looking at price point and how long the product lasts, well, that might be something you're looking at. Oh, I might have to spend $200 up front, but in a year from now, I'm still going to have that product available, and I'm not going to have to spend another $200 in 6 months or a year.
As far as like a base, I was always getting the 3.8 cubic foot bales, the big bales of the sphagnum peat moss. And that always seemed to have more of a fiber to it that I liked as far as keeping the base. I would imagine you could probably use more of like a cocoa as well.
Yeah, there's a
different mix as far as what base you use. You might
there's
have
a lot of people, Smiley, that tell me how they use cocoa as a base for super soil instead of a perlite and a peat moss, which all that material is going to do is break down over time, and you're going to have to add more, where your soil, most of that, you know, it does the same thing. Your perlite breaks down or flows to the top and washes off, and then you got to put some type of more aeration back in your soil, or the peat moss in it breaks down over time, and then you see everything settle down and you have less and less amounts over time. So you're still going to have to amend and add stuff if you reuse your soil over time.
Right. But yeah, as far as the difference between cocoa and like peat moss, I would, to my understanding, you're going to have to amend the calcium a little different to adjust for what's in the cocoa versus the peat moss. So you may have to look up rethink a little different recipe on some of that too. And it's really going to depend on if the cocoa is like washed or other kind of factors too. But I always would try to stay away from the more fine grained peat mosses where they're almost like a dust or like, what's the one I'm thinking, Pro Mixes kind of shit, you know? Where
it's fine as hell. It really is. But I think that most of us need to get away from perlite in general and get to more of a pumice or a lava rock or something, growstone, or what are those that they use in hydro? Those yeah, something like that that's going to retain a little bit more water to it, a little bit more porosity to hold oxygen and allow the biology to get in there, and it's not breaking down so quickly.
and it's not floating to the top, like you say, because like, if you get a good, if you're doing that watering cycle where you should like right side wave, and you give a good flood soaking, man, that stuff does float up to the top, and like you say, you do lose a lot of your porosity in that. So that makes a lot of sense, and I've heard that a couple different places over the years, and again more recently here, I think on Eagle's channel here, and it's a good reminder to me. I've been using ProMix myself recently just because it's easy to start as a base. But you guys have good points. I might have to play around with some new ideas and new materials. But we really should get back and give these guys a base list of, say, the 8 products for the soil base.
Right on. I believe the original recipe calls for 8 bags of base, 2 to 50 pounds of earthworm castings, 5 pounds of bone meal, 5 pounds of back guano, 5 pounds of bone meal, 3 pounds of rock sulfate, 3/4 cups of Epsom salts, half cup of dolomite lime, half cup of azomite, 2 teaspoons of powdered humic acid, excuse me, is what the base recipe calls for. Now, I've heard you
When you
mention
look at down
alfalfa.
to earth,
Would you add alfalfa to that list? Because at one point, I believe alfalfa was in that list. And why, in your opinion, was it removed? I guess.
I don't know why it was removed. I would leave it in there because the tricantanol does a lot of benefits to help the plant finish sooner, go through a lot of stresses, from drought to heat to helping the plant grow. Like there's a lot to tricantanol.
Yep, and a lot of excellent enzymes in alfalfa meal as well. Another one I would add to that is neem cake. And I run the rock dust like we were talking about before, and kelp meal for sure. Like get those trace minerals in there.
But if you're tweaking the recipe, you're going to have to look at reducing other portions if you're going to add something in or replace something. Otherwise, you know what I mean? It's like making a bread, dude. You're going to just add shit into making bread all of a sudden. Well, you got a different bread, you know?
Is there a good recipe like that? I know, say, when I build a house, okay, there's efficiency numbers we have to abide by these days. And we can trade off a little bit of this to that, like you're saying on ingredients here. So is there like a magic, ratio of numbers there that you're ultimately shooting for? I know ultimately when you were to buy like a fertilizer, we always thought, even numbers, 333, whatever, you know what I mean? So with that in mind, is there like a plus minus that we can do in our heads to even that out mathematically, or is it?
Well, that's what I was starting to say is on Down to Earth's website, what they recommend per X amount of volume is way less than what Subcool is adding to some of those recipes. And so when you're saying, hey, for 8 bags of this and it's a whole 5-pound box, whoa, wait a minute, because what they're saying for a cubic foot is like a couple cups per a cubic foot of what they're recommending. And it's like, wait a minute, are we like putting more in than what we really need on some of this? So you got to kind of look at that and really look at what the recommendation is from the manufacturer as well, because they have a different recommendation than what we may agree upon out here. You're muted, Eagle.
With that being said, how inert, I guess, does the base need to be? I mean, does the base need to be pretty much peat, or can it come preloaded with some shit too, or does that fuck up the recipe?
Well, look at starter mixes. They have a small trace amount of like a 222 of their elements of what they're looking for a starter seedling mix. So they have quite a bit smaller amount of what they're putting in than 5-pound bag of bone meal, fish bone meal. Like, yeah, that doesn't take a lot. for your seedlings to really take off, you just need some of, just even trace amounts of it, really. I mean, if you look at worm casting and people that put their seedlings in worm casting, there's not much, but there's a lot of availability of different nutrients, but it's in micro doses, not like larger amounts that we're making in some of these bags.
Yeah, and this might be a good spot to just stop and talk about like plant nutrient requirements from seedling point out to flowering, fruiting, and how that goes up exponentially as you go from framing and to flowering and on to fruiting, or developing flowers out to full buds, as the case may be with cannabis. Those nutrient demands go up dramatically. You need so little for a seedling and so much for a finishing plant. So that's just something to keep in mind in the context of this general conversation. Eagle, you're muted.
He is muted. Oh, fuck. Oh, shit.
I fucked up. You started hitting the Zoom mic instead of the mute on my microphone. Sorry about that. Yes, it is a super soil conversation. Kind of read along there in chat. So as far as like cocoa goes, I always used to pick Sub's mind about, using cocoa. I mean, are we losing something there? I mean, is the microbes going to play as well as they would, say, in peat? Is there going to be a terrible pH swing that's going to be throwing things off constantly? Is there a plus or minus to one substrate or the other?
If I remember correctly, peat moss versus cocoa had a different pH swing than the peat moss did. And that's why a lot of people that grow in cocoa really have to watch their pH swing when they're feeding. Because even after you're feeding, it can spike at times because all the salts that are in there, or it can drop sometimes because you don't have enough in there. So there's definitely a swing with cocoa versus some of the peat moss. But peat moss, if I remember, it's kind of acidic to begin with.
About 5.5 pH.
Yep.
Yeah, and let me just comment on the cocoa as well. I've never personally grown in cocoa. Although I am experimenting with some mushroom culture in cocoa. And I know a bunch of people that grow in cocoa and they swear by it. And exactly what you're saying about it is it has a little less buffer value than the peat does as far as pH swings and nutrient adjustments. So, just to reinforce your point about that.
So that might have been the reason why he didn't really use cocoa versus peat moss in his original recipe. You're on mute again, Eagle.
That probably won't be the last time you say that. Yeah, I've always been a cocoa grower myself, or for the most part. So, I've always wanted to at least try a couple of runs in the super soil, maybe even a reuse type thing. But I've never really done it. So I'm curious to see how well it would perform, because I've always liked the aeration of cocoa myself.
Are you seeing any swings in your pH? Are you having any issues where it just changes on you and you're having some lockout issues or anything like that you noticed?
I never really had any good or terrible problems in cocoa. So no.
Like I said, the growers that I know that grow in it swear by it. And some of them have grown in peat and soil and hydro, and they've done all different methods. And they're like, man, once I went to cocoa, I never went back. And I've seen some killer grows doing it, so I am impressed. Some of them are running organic, soil mixes and stuff with it, and some are just running more hydroponic related, but with organic nutrients and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a mixed variation, but interesting.
I do think that peat moss would be a little more biologically active, though, as far as that goes. And I do think that cocoa has more of an aeration or air holding capacity is one of the differences. So there's some things to consider for sure. People in chat were talking about even mixing them half and half, even on like a mix, So just depends. There's definitely options. I don't think one's like way better or worse, or I've used both.
And I hear a lot of people that really, hey, I really like using the cocoa with my super soil. I get a lot of great benefits. I'm seeing a lot of great growth. I've not had many issues except my cocoa breaking down a little faster than the peat moss. And that's really it. I haven't heard a lot of complaints about, oh, I'm not going back to using cocoa. It's more positive than negative on it.
For sure.
That still depends on the fiber size that you get, even if it is cocoa or peat. Like, it really depends on that fiber size of what's going to happen.
I completely agree with you on that. And let's just talk about characteristics of soil and soil structure a little bit while we're here. I mean, like, while we're talking about making super soil, right? Like, what kind of soil structure do we want to see in soil? We want to see a crumb structure, right? Where there's little balls of soil with microbiology and nutrients in little balls that kind of keep those little balls apart from each other. And that lets air and gases flow through that soil and feed that biology, both carbon dioxide and oxygen. That's super important. So that's part of why we're doing the perlite or whatever the other aeration coarse stuff that we're putting in. That's part of what that's about, is letting that gas exchange happen through that soil. And while we're on the point, another part of that is that sine wave watering that we do. That's where, we water heavily and we flood. We're pushing all the gases out of the soil when we do that. And then new gases are being exchanged back in as that flood recedes out of that soil. So just a couple of little points on the side about it.
Well, and you were talking about like the little glomalin balls of the glues that they use to kind of help hold everything together. And when you're finding that in your super soils as you're mixing it, you know that you've got stuff kind of already established in there.
Yes.
And so that's great, either in cocoa or perlite, that when you're going through your super soil and you're dumping it to transplant and you're seeing these little clumps, you can break them down and allow it to rebuild other places. But if you leave it, that's more preferable. So you're not destroying or destroying in a sense.
Yep. Should be basically 5 spheres in a natural soil system, right? We got the detritus sphere on top. That's where most of your decay happens, right? We got the rhizosphere, which is the root part of the soil. We've got the porosphere, which is that first aggregate level in the soil. Below that, we've got a larger aggregate of those same glomulation you're talking about. Those are the agrosphere. And then we have the drillosphere, which is where the worms and all the other microbes are exchanging through that soil. So 5 different spheres of that soil structure, basic soil structure. And that's what we're trying to make once again. You're muted, Med.
Back at you, man.
Yeah. A lot of us talk about that horizontal layering.
Yeah.
And if you really look at like Mother Nature and you look at the layers that she's done, and you go back to the Midwest where you have that good topsoil, and as you dig down, you hit that clay layer, and it's so thick and so hard of clay that's another layer to this horizontal layer. And then when you get towards like rivers and lakes, you start getting to the rocky areas, and then you hit some of that bedrock in some of these areas. And so really the horizontal layer, like, oh gosh, who was the first one that really kind of started talking about it?
Leighton Morris.
Leighton. That's who I was trying to think of. He was really bringing it up, and no, like, that's mimicking Mother Nature. What are we trying to do? We're trying to mimic Mother Nature as much as possible with cultivating either regenerative, super soil, organically. So,
and just back to the point, why are we doing that? Because that's the system that survived for millions of years and has been successful. So hey, let's go with what works.
You don't see Mother Nature adding nutrients to the forest or the prairies, do you? And everything's growing fine. Some things get disease, some things, I mean, that's the life cycle. And we all seem to forget the cycle of life, how even the healthiest plants can still end up with a disease at some point. And no matter what you do to combat it, doesn't mean you're going to win. It may overcome the plant.
And the super soil is going to fall just fully in that O layer, the organic layer, because that's fully going to be composting and breaking down. That's what, that's like the idea of having the moisture be able to flow through it is very important takeaway as well. So some of the amendments that you add, like the compost portion, or if you're adding kelp can add water holding capacity to the soil depending on how much you're putting in there. So there's things to consider with that, but the end goal is you want that soil to be able to drain properly and breathe and not hold the water as long, you know what I mean? So that'd be kind of a takeaway as far as aeration goes, I guess.
Well, look at the redox that's happening down in there with the nutrients and the biology. Oxidative reactive states that are happening through the soil from these amendments that we're putting in. We're trying to balance pH, but each one is changing in its own. But bacteria wants it a little bit more alkaline. Fungi wants it a little bit more acidic. So even when you're trying to balance the pH in your soil, you're not going to balance it because each biology acts differently. Some of them are breaking things down through an oxidative state. You have high oxygen, reactive species. And then you have stuff that are reductive that work just the opposite. And so we forget a lot of this with super soil, how a lot of this redox happens. And, everybody's like, oh, I need to worry about my pH of my water. Really, I don't worry about the pH of my water. I just add the water. I may make sure it's dechlorinated. I make sure it may have oxygen or oxygenated to help, but I don't worry about pH level.
Only thing I would concern about more on water would be carbonates and bicarbonates content, because those can really limit soil microbial activity and all of those trace mineral exchange processes that go on in the soil, especially manganese and zinc. And those are super important, both for reproductivity and for they're supportive to the photosynthetics process as well. So that's something I would also keep in mind amongst that conversation.
So when you say that, talk about redox and the different zones of temperature, I kind of think about like a graph that I know that fucking nutrients are available at different pH zones. So these are nitrogen zones or whatever, wherever that pH matches that nutrient, is that like our vein of nitrogen, our vein of, you know what I mean?
Can I?
What's going on there, basically, what you're talking about when with the different zones of heat or pH rather as well.
Let me just jump into this real quick. This is part of why we talk about diversity so much, because each of those different microbes, whether it's bacteria or fungi or nematodes or on down the list of all, there's a lot of them, right? Each one of those has its own pH range, its own exchange system. And if you actually drill down and take one of those little porous sphere pieces of soil out and look at that on a microscopic level, that's like a whole little planet all by itself going on with all of that activity. And in fact, that soil can actually seem dry to the touch and have a tremendous amount of moisture available to microbes in it, where it would not be available in a conventional system where you're pushing salt solutions into a plant's root system. So that's just something to consider as well. I hope I answered your question, or partially did.
Well, then if you look at Mother Nature, is Mother Nature pH in the soil? No. We are doing that ourselves by adding different amendments or force feeding our crops. So we're changing the pH level. So now we got to be concerned on, is our level in the right range for our plants to uptake these nutrients? When the biology itself is doing that for you. there's no concern then about, oh, am I in the right pH level?
Exactly. And I'll give you a great example of that, where Mother Nature can show us that. You look at where blueberries grow naturally. They are pH acidic zones, often near swamps and rocky outcroppings. So there's a tremendous amount of calcium and phosphorus there. Well, if you measure what's in blueberries, there's a tremendous amount of calcium and phosphorus. That acidic biology in that soil is what's exchanging that off of those rock sites and bringing that to the plant. Now you see conventional farmers will take a blueberry plant and put all sorts of sulfur down to try and acidify the soil. But at the end of the day, like, it doesn't do the same thing. It's John Kempf was talking about this out in Oregon, the Willamette Valley. The guy got his soil levels corrected, and he's harvesting like 98% of his blueberries in one pass, and they're all bigger than a quarter now, just because he got that system balanced out. And he stopped pH buffering his soil and just put the correct nutrition in the soil and the correct biology. So,
Well, so let's go back to super soil. Lime. People use dolomite lime quite a bit in their soil. And it is to bring it to a balance of a neutral pH. So it's not too alkaline and it's not acidic. Where do they apply a lot of lime at? On acidic soils to bring the balance up to a neutral.
Yep.
Even though it has a lot of calcium and some magnesium to the dolomite lime, like that's one of the things that people are still trying to adjust the pH using this. So you're not in an acidic soil, but you're now trying to be more of a balance. So your plants that are in that acidic soil can better take up nutrients.
and that's part of why, like, I don't like dolomitic lime as much as I do gypsum, because you're providing some sulfur along with that. And that's critical for protein synthesis and so many other pieces in that biochemical sequence of nutrition, you know, from silica on up to the top of the chain there. Was it carbon or sugars or potassium, where sugars go into the fruits or flowers of the plant, basically.
See, and lime is good to an extent because of the magnesium in it. And if you're worried about calcium magnesium, well, that's a product that actually has both to it. And they're available, but some of it has to be broken down. Some of it's soluble, some of it's insoluble. So it's not a bad thing for using dolomite lime. It's just the amount that you're using. Because gypsum, like you said, it has sulfur in it. It doesn't have the magnesium. Plants need sulfur for a lot of key uptake, photosynthesis, to terpene production and synthesis. And so, I mean, like, it's hard to choose which is a better choice. And that's why, what's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's why I actually use a combination of both. When I got away from dolomite lime, my recipe changed, and I was having different outcomes of what was producing it through my terpenoid profile, flavonoid profile. So it does make a difference.
I see somebody in chat saying too much cal, not too bad, too much mag, not so good. I would agree with that. And same with too much potassium. Both of those can really tip that that cation balance out on you. You got to be delicate with them sometimes.
So the biggest part of this here recipe is bat guano and earthworm castings. So
I don't even use bat guano. I don't use it at all.
no,
A lot of people believe that using bat guano, but I always found that it gave my plants a nastier taste in the profile. And so that's why I stopped using it.
I've used a lot less of it in recent years. I can say that for sure. Way reduced.
so
Well,
I
Go
guess
ahead, Eagle.
I was just gonna say, let's talk about earthworm castings there. Is there a difference in quality from the store-bought and stuff? Obviously, there's a difference in quality from the store-bought and stuff and the stuff that you produce. So should they if there's soils mixing is something that they're gonna do a lot of in the future, do you think they might as well get started with an earthworm bin now I mean, a lot of the products that I've seen on the shelf, from just mixing up like a slurry, putting some in my water and stirring it up, I've seen a big difference from brand to brand, the amount of sand that's in some of these shit, and it's all sold by weight. So I don't trust the big companies. I
Well,
honestly think they would feed the worms a shitload of sand just so they can use a lot less product in the end.
well, think about most of your worm bins. What are you feeding the worms? Each one's feeding differently their worms. Not a lot of them are feeding all food scraps. Some of them are feeding like paper material to them, shit like that, or scrap meat, shit like that. Some of them you're saying sand to like, so that's the one thing. It's going to come down to what they are really putting in to feed your fucking worms, because your castings, if there's any like pesticides on stuff or any chemicals in some of that, it's going to go right into that worm casting. The worms are going to either avoid eating it or eat it and still release some of that toxin.
Yep. It won't be broken down that quickly. It takes thousands and thousands of times for those toxins to be broken down. For sure. So,
but then you look at your types of worms.
Always, right? Like, I mean, the worm castings that I get they're bagged, like they're kind of like a soil, right? Like I don't buy bottled worm castings. I feel like it works.
How long has that bag set out in the sun? Baking. Right. Killing the biology in it.
How intact is that biology? Yes, exactly. So and that's why it's better to have worms right in your soil if you can. Like that's what I'm doing with my soil bins now. I'm incorporating worms and mulches right into the soil bins. I want to mimic that soil in like a little brick bin, basically.
And so I think using worm castings to help get the enzymes and some of the nutrient availability, because they have different enzymes and different biology that they excrete when they eat the food. It's a good start, but having worms mainly in your pots or in your no-till systems is the best bet, because then you know what they're getting fed, you know what they're breaking down. You also know they're creating holes and tunnels to get oxygen and air down into the root zones. And that's really the important part.
And remember, that's part of the 5 spheres of soil. That drillosphere is a super important one. And while we're on the point, let's talk about worms and the biology that they are associated with for a moment. Okay, cross between a chicken and a cow as far as biology of the gut of a worm, right? So think about what chickens and cows to do to soil. If you do regenerative agriculture where you're passing cows through and then you're passing chickens through behind that, and then you're letting it grow back up again. Same thing, except with a worm, you get both of those livestock benefits without having to have livestock on or in your soil, which means you can do it in a small scale.
Well, thanks to Coot, we know that the worms excrete a calcium and calcium layer around when they poop. So all the way they go through that casting has a calcium layer on the outside, a mucus layer or whatever. So that's one of the benefits of it too.
So if you pick up a worm, like a night crawler, like you're fishing, they get all this jelly goo stuff on them, right? That's the same thing as they're tunneling through all the holes. They're leaving that. That's building structure for the biology to continue to live and build off of. Without that, it's not gluing that stuff together like it needs to be. Then it's going to, when the water hits it, it's just going to break apart. The biology is not going to have a place to kind of keep building the community. So we're looking for that stuff in our soils.
And guess what else that nice little wormhole through the soil does? It leaves a place for plants to throw a root through where there's a high nutrient density directly available and a high biology level. So they can follow those holes and pick up even more nutrient that way really easily. So lots of benefits to worm, for sure. Live worms better than worm castings. Worm castings are still beneficial. Live worms are much more.
If you're looking for like a local source, another name might be vermicompost. You might search it under there. But also, if you're trying to source a local one, it's going to have more of a biological subset of biology from your area. The fresher you can get it, so like if you could get them to scoop it out of their pile and into a bag and you go home, fresher you can get it is probably the better too. Avoiding like plastic bags.
Well,
It's tending to be a good rule of thumb. And but yeah, I would go if you're anywhere in the U.S. anyway. You could seek out like a local food farmers market, and you start asking about vermicompost. They're gonna know somebody, most likely. Somebody there is gonna know somebody, and you can get hooked up with a local source. Would be the best bet.
well, if you look at Build-A-Soil's worm compost, a lot of people rave about it because they actually have eggs in it. So not only are they getting worm castings, they're getting eggs that the worms are going to start hatching in their soil over time. So that's a positive thing. If your worm castings, they have eggs to them, dude, that's like bomb. Like you're getting 2 for 1 in that worm casting because you're getting castings and free worms.
Dude, that's your soil seed right there.
And far as I know, most of
That's
the
the
people when you
benefit of sourcing it local and not having, because like you throw the shit in a plastic bag, they seal it, it goes on a pallet, it ships across wherever.
sits in the sun for days.
It's in whatever factory or in the sun or
Yeah.
whatever, you know what I mean? But that thing's in that bag for who knows how long. The bags are airtight. That's a whole different product than something that you got pulled fresh from a compost, an active worm bed, you know what I mean? Or pulled right out.
You know what the funny thing is?
So the closer to the source you can get, the better off you're going to be with that.
You know what the funny thing is? This year I decided to incorporate worms again into my soil bins, and I'm actually, like, a friend of mine had a huge pile of leaves over at his place, and like I stopped while I was over there the other day, or you know, it was a while back, but there were, you know, big pile of leaves. I dig in, of course, there's a ton of worms there. So I brought home a bunch of the leaves and the worms, and I mixed up some new soils, and I put the worms and the leaves and the mulch on top of those soils, and they're sitting in crates now. I've been checking on them, and I can see the worms starting to drill down through the soil, and they're working into the mulch and all. Really cool to see that, like, kind of just capture that process and add it.
It really depends on what type of worm too. The composting worms will really consume a lot, you know, if you have them in your pot. It does take a lot, so you almost want to, if you're going to try to put and run worms in the pot, you want to consider how you're applying a food source for them, because they definitely need it, and like you're gonna have to be putting leaves down on the soil or something down for them, because they do kind of move through a lot of stuff. So
and that's what you gotta watch.
Like if they don't got nothing, they might just even move out, you know. But you're gonna want to have a mulch layer, something that's breaking down for them. So.
And red wigglers are bad about that because they consume so much so fast that you need to continuously keep feeding your red wigglers. And that's why, like, if you're doing pots, if I'm doing a 10, 25 gallon pot, I'm putting like 5 or 6 worms in there, because if they're going to start taking over that pot, they're going to find somewhere else to go because there's not enough food in there. And so, or they're going to die off because I don't have enough food in there. But
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in my no-till beds, I'm chopping and dropping all the time. I'm picking up wood debris, little chunks of sticks, and throwing it in and giving them more of that, the browns and not all the greens. And we need to do that stuff to keep the, how do I want to say it, the population under control. Who was it? I was hearing Jeremy from Build-A-Soil talking on a video that was a year old, talking about if they overpopulate, you can then take all that soil and split it up into other soil piles and start other soils with that heavily populated worm pile.
Yep.
How easily is it to keep a population in, say, the hemp buckets there, the SIPs containers that you use, Smiley? Is throwing food underneath that cap gonna get weird from the time that they consume it? Or, I mean, what is the best process, feed worms in a SIPS container, I guess, was throwing my life away's question.
I wouldn't say I know the best way, but definitely they do consume some stuff. They'll chill in there though. Them things will become like a little worm bin or whatever. Like yeah, they get active in there. I don't know.
I've had a hard time keeping worm bins where they don't want to stay in there, or I'm not keeping the moisture right, and I'm trying to get moisture back in there because I'm in such a high desert or desert area that I just said, fuck it. I'm not going to try to attempt it. It's too difficult for the environment I'm in, and I'm not going to make a special room, humidity control, just to keep them active.
I had worm bins years back, and I had the same thing. I found it very difficult. It took a lot of energy and focus. And I found like if I could just get the worms in the soil, they're doing the job they're supposed to do. Trying to like isolate this process and keep it that system, right? Like let's just work with it.
Yeah, and having a proper amount of space for them and all that too. I mean, there's things to consider. Like I don't know, they do consume a lot. You're gonna want to keep that in mind that they're gonna want to feed. I don't know, but under the earth boxes have had them keep. But lately, I've been dumping the soil and flipping. So, just trying to get rid of a potential root feeding nematode that I was fighting. So there's downfalls and risks, I guess, not downfalls, but there's risks that when to use your soil too. So
here's an amendment that I don't know why you're not using for your root feeding nematodes is neem seed meal. That literally chases root feeding nematodes or kills them. Like
really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Neem seed meal is known to get rid of root feeding nematodes. They don't like it. There's something about the odor or the smell or something it puts off that they cannot be in that environment.
No, I did read marigolds, French marigolds too. They grow something. They release something in their root zone that actually actively kills them or whatever.
But the shit part about marigolds, they fucking bring thrips.
Yeah.
Thrips like fucking marigolds. So it's like you're getting rid of one for the other, It's like trying to balance shit. It's like, well, I want to put this, but all of a sudden, where the fuck these thrips come from? Oh, they love marigolds? No. Now I'm infested with fucking thrips because I put them to chase the deer and rabbits and other pests away. So it's fucking hard, man, trying to figure out what really works and what doesn't attract pests that you don't want when you're trying to use benefit.
I think a lot of it is
like
even talking earlier, Sub adjusted the super soil recipe somewhat throughout the rounds and throughout using it, and I think that's a big takeaway is you're gonna get stuff, you're gonna mix your soil, whatever, have certain results, and then the next time you go to mix soil, you're gonna not be able to find the same shit that you found the first time or sourced the first time. So you gotta adjust a little bit, or you notice in the growth cycle that you thought, hey, maybe I got to try this a little bit different next time, and a little less of this or a little more of that or whatever. Usually it's a little less of this, on that
side. Look at one of the amendments look at what Subcool added. Insect frass.
Yeah, that's
why did he add that? That had chitinase to it.
Insect frass has some activity for sure.
It has a lot of beneficial biology to it as well as the chitinase. And what does chitinase do? Helps your plant's secondary metabolites and its self-defense. So Sub changed stuff to try to better the recipe after hearing other people and what they were doing with some of theirs. Okay.
And it's funny. Newest stuff that comes around too, you know what I'm saying? Like some of them ingredients weren't necessarily at hand to consider at the original recipe, and that's kind of what I was getting at. The next time you go to mix shit, awesome. Like that happened to me. I had 3 different mixes, not intentionally, but it was because the first aeration source that I found was not sold anymore. It was those, they were chunks of glass or whatever, basically. It was like recycled glass and shit. Grow stones, I think they call them. But yeah, but then they stopped making them. I couldn't get them or whatever. So then you're sourcing something different, and you're sourcing something different.
Well, Smarley, this is the fucked up part about down to earth amendments, right? I bone meal, and it be a 3, 14, whatever. Go back and get a different box, and now it's a 4, 12. So even down to earth amendments will fucking change the variation on what their products have to them. So my super soil is not always going to be the same recipe, which kind of sucks because if I found something that works, but the products have different percentages of the nutrients to it.
Also, let's not
It's going
forget.
to make it harder to match my recipe.
Let's also not forget how that testing is done. That's not each box being tested. That's a batch being tested, and that may vary within the batch. So what's on the box may not be exactly what you're getting.
Well, they put like a minimum, to my understanding. That's like a guaranteed minimum that's on there.
Right.
So
Exactly.
even though it says a 222, right? It could be actually, if you had it tested, it could be like a 564 or something. But it was guaranteed to be a 22 above a 222, or at least that, or whatever. So those aren't exact numbers. So that's another thing to kind of consider, is those aren't exact numbers even to begin with.
So we were talking about Subcool would put 5-pound boxes in some of the recipes. Well, when you're coming to flour, you don't want a lot of excessive nitrogen towards the finish of your flour. Your plant's still going to use some. Yes, it needs nitrogen to help development of buds and take in photosynthesis and do all that stuff. But you having high excessive amounts of nitrogen in flour, that's not a good thing. Like, you're not getting the potential. And so look at all these amendments, how much nitrogen is in each of them. We do not need all of that nitrogen. It has already been proven. We are over adding nitrogen to our soils.
And to your point, if you got excess nitrogen, you're going to have bugs chewing on your plants. That's a guarantee.
It's already been proven excessive nitrogen will have pest problems. Aphids, mites, grasshoppers, stuff eating it because the plant's sending the signal off, come eat me. I'm perfect now.
And it's literally putting out an infrared signal. The insects can see it up to 2,500 yards away. Believe that shit? Go check out Tom Dykstra on Advancing Eco Agriculture. Fascinating.
Well, and that's the one thing about plants. They communicate in the root zone. They communicate sending frequencies or different chemical smells off in the air to let other plants and biology know around that, hey, I'm being attacked. Hey, start defending yourself. Hey, be aware. This is the type of, because they can release different chemicals per the pest attacking them. So it's great that the plants around them. Go ahead, Smiley.
No, I was gonna say, I just seen a thing today about how bees. There was this dude studying plants' reactions to bees, and they played the frequency or the sound of like bees' wings for this certain flower, and they saw it increase its nectar production like 20%. The plant responded to that, so like the scientist study was like showing like these things are actually like reserving the energy, the plants are, until they're not going to make the nectar until they know the bees are ready or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden that triggers them to actually up the production. Oh, hey, they're here, let's go up the production and get it going. I just thought that was an interesting tidbit. Like the plants and insects are connected. It's a system. Like, it's amazing in my opinion what creation is.
Talking about everything connected, right? Ray Archuleta is a gentleman I've listened to for 10 years probably, and he used to work for the government, and he got away from it, and now he's really about regenerative agriculture, living soil. But what he discusses when he's doing his lecture is everything is one, everything is interconnected and is one entity. We need these bugs, the plants need the bugs. If we kill the bees off, the plants aren't producing the food that we need, and then we're having problems. Like, everything is interconnected. When we start killing off species of bees or different bugs, then different birds start dying off because that was their food source. And so when we're spraying these fungicides on our plants, bees larvae eat fungus. It's now killing the bee larvae by taking this fungicide into their community. And that's why we're having bee population problems, is fungicides and spraying herbicides and pesticides on plants that we don't need them. Our plants are out of balance chemically, and that's why we're having problems.
Believe it or not, Paul Stamets is actually helping revitalize bee populations using specific types of fungi that the bees actually access and extract nutrients from. He thinks it's something along the lines of beta glucans, but it's helping them, adapt basically against the pesticides and mites and the other pressures that are on the bee populations. So you're muted.
Envy Closet Med Growers even in the chat, and he's talking, you guys see the research about tomato plants making high frequencies noises when being attacked by pests. It's not that the human can hear the sounds or the frequencies, but other plants around it can pick up those frequencies or the sounds that are being put off or the chemical smells that they're releasing to know that they're being attacked. And right there, he's even showing that there's research on tomato plants about it too.
Oh, I don't doubt that. Them plants are definitely communicating. There's a lot of interesting white papers on that. So I guess the question, if you're going to talk about that, is it all happening above or is it happening below? Is it happening through the microbes in the soil as well, or
both.
Is it
It's both.
It's both. It's both.
Yes. So they're saying to the biology in the soil, we're being attacked. We need different nutrients or different secondary metabolites to start protecting ourselves to defend against these invasions or these attacks from these pests. So it's not only in the root zone, but that's kind of where the plant is starting its first signal to send these secondary metabolites off in the air so these other plants can then understand what's happening.
Absolutely. And let's back up for a sec too, since you talked about, is it above or below? No, it is both for sure. We got the rhizosphere, the root zone, right? And the soil that surrounds that and all of the activity that goes on in that. But let's not forget the importance of the phytoplane, the leaf surface, okay? There's biological activity on that as well. That's part of why we do good inoculants, right? We put a good rhizophageal type bacteria on there. Now we can fix nitrogen right from the air. The air is what, 78% nitrogen? Now we don't have to add it chemically and force it on the plant. It can take it when it needs it, as it needs it, right from the biology on the plant. What else do we get from that? We have biology on the plant. So how is bad biology going to attack the plant? Well, now it's got to get through a whole host of good biology first. So we have a lot of important pieces that go into that.
Well, here's going back to
it's both.
The biology. You have good and bad. That's there always. The good is keeping the bad population in control, that it doesn't turn into an outbreak of E. coli, salmonella, something that's deadly. Because whether you think it or not, E. coli is right there. You're breathing it in. You're eating it on the food that you're taking in. It's all around you. It's just the good biology is keeping most of that in check, that it's not getting to be where it's a problem. And so we all seem to not comprehend that at times, like, oh, well, E. coli, like if I'm, here's a great thing. Kevin McInernan from Medical Genomics. He does a lot of PCR testing, and there's a big deal with Oregon and the testing of the aspergillus and the powder mildew and testing for high biology on their flower. And he's showing that their tests are not complete, how they're falsified, how naturally these are there in the air. And so we're taking stuff that's naturally occurring on our flower and saying, oh, it's too high, it's too this, it's too that. You can't sell these flowers because it's a danger. But they're not talking about the beneficials that's keeping it under control, even though it's still there. Like I can go in my refrigerator, grab some salad of some sort, either some spinach or arugula, And yeah, it may be washed and cleaned, but I bet you there's a trace amount of E. coli on it or salmonella, but it's not going to kill me because the good biology is keeping it under control. So that makes a big difference when we look at a lot of this.
And I reinforce that myself by eating a lot of sauerkraut and probiotic, prebiotic foods. And let's remember, that's working the same thing in the human gut system, in our digestive system, same exact thing. You put good biology there to defend the gut. The digestive tract of the plant is the soil. We have one on us, and we all need that biology for that defense and that proper exchange.
Cheers. Cheers, Mr. Smiley. So bringing it back to super soil a little bit, I believe the only fucking ingredients we have yet to talk about, or at least according to this on this recipe, are the blood and bone meal. What you guys' thoughts on blood and bone meal? Plus and minuses? Do you have some substitutions?
Blood meal. Blood meal is an animal-based product. So if you don't like blood or animals being killed, don't use it. Okay? Go do your vegan stuff somewhere else.
Yeah, it is literally blood.
It's literally blood. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. But it's full of nitrogen, and it's high in nitrogen. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing for a quick nitrogen boost, but do not use it heavily. It is hard to get it flushed out of your soil, especially if you top dress it late in flower. You're not going to get it out past day 30.
I will say it's great if you're early season outdoor in the ground and you want to keep deer away from young plants. A light dusting of that will keep the deer away from it.
That's an interesting use. I haven't heard that before. That's cool. I mean, there's pluses and minuses. So, like Ego's saying, so what's a substitute? Well, it's a high nitrogen source. So, like, if you're going to add certain different things, maybe you're going to bring in alfalfa has some nitrogen, insect grass has some nitrogen. So now maybe you're not going to use as much bone meal or blood meal, or maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe you dial that back with some soybean meal or different amendments like that can have a nitrogen source in a little different way and bring other things, you know.
And if you're putting some neem cake in there, neem cake's going to have a little nitrogen. So again, you know, you can balance that again, right? Like, kind of like spread your spectrum. And again, you know, I feel like, I mean, like we're talking about the subcool soil mix, right?
That's not fair, man. He's got a puppy. That's not fair. That's like total distraction. Like, what is a puppy? I love dogs. Sorry.
Oh, it's all good. I feel like that diversity is really super.
I don't have one puppy. I have 7 puppies right at the moment.
What kind of dog are they?
They're Aussie healer mixes.
I was thinking that has an Aussie look to it.
Yeah.
I got an Australian Shepherd too. He's more the tricolor, I think they call him, where he's the black, gold, and like black, bronze, and cream, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah. So my male dog, his mom was a mini tricolor. His dad was white, red, brown tricolor. And I got a healer. It's actually it's a Queensland pit. Her mom's a full blood pit bull. Her dad is a miniature blue healer. And so she definitely looks the healer and white tick marks. And these babies are just fucking cute as hell.
They're adorable, like, man. Yeah.
They're playful. They want to play. They're almost 6 weeks now, so they're all up, running through the house. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, the sweet little face when you held them up was just adorable.
Sorry, big distraction. We're on
super soil.
Yeah.
Probably brings up a good point there. A lot of the way they push a lot of these big cattle farms and shit. Can these bone and blood meals be no because of the big ag that they maybe come from? You know,
possibly, yeah. Not pesticides with like antibiotics and shit like that.
GMO corn-fed cows and stuff like that. I mean, how much of that bad shit that they're fed can actually shake off in that blood meal and stuff
I
like
can, I can very much talk specifically to that because I heard John Kemp's give a talk years back about that. He was specifically talking about glyphosate. He was talking about how that actually contaminates the bone matrix. Not a living organism, but it actually how it replicates or something. It messes up the bone mineral matrix. That's an overdose of glyphosate on a hay crop for a bunch of cows. It actually causes like 8 out of the 900 cows that were pregnant to avert a bunch of cow deaths. And I can go on and on, but basically, yes, it does affect the bone mineral matrix, and it's a non-living organism that comes from that. So I would say you probably better not to source from that unless it's from an organic cow source, right? I don't know that it translates through in the soil, but let's try and eliminate stuff like that, especially like even if it's affected the cow, right? Then you have a glyphosate in there to begin with, right? So now you're adding glyphosate into your soil mix when there are other alternative calcium sources, is what I would say. So pick a better source. Always go for a higher quality source would be my.
Well, there's a lot of problems also with genetic modified foods or crops.
Yeah.
They're finding that these grub worms that were supposed to be resistant are now super eating these resistant GMO crops. So them changing the alternate or the chemical structure of the plant, they thought it would be resistant to the stuff. Well, now they're finding, oh, now it's really attacking it and it's not doing what it was designed to do. Oh shit, what do we do now?
And they're finding genetic cross genetics in the soil, in the microbes, in soils that are growing GMO. It's actually disrupting that soil biology. And those genes, some of those genes are actually being transferred across. So there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on when you start playing with that.
I just love it. At least nobody had to tell me I was muted that time.
I couldn't. I was muted too.
So I guess this is a good time as any to ask if there's any questions out there. You know, if there's anything the chat would like to know, ask.
Man, it's been an hour and a half already.
I
Wow.
know, right?
Yeah,
I kind of knew this would go as quickly as it has. I mean, it's one of them things, man. Organics is a very passionate conversation, and it's easy to pass the time quickly when you're having a lot of good, passionate conversation.
Well, and we didn't even get into the discussion of what each amendment does specifically in this conversation. That's another couple-hour conversation.
we should probably go through each amendment in a session maybe and kind of really get into some of the intimate details, because each one has a tremendous amount of intimate details. Like I know a bunch of stuff. I'm sure you guys know a bunch of stuff that I don't know. We piece that all together. We're going to paint a really nice picture of all of those pieces and how they function with each other and within the bigger system. So.
All right, yeah, I guess we could shoot down that rabbit hole, or that wormhole as we're calling it, first. So, yeah, I guess we could start there. What are some of the pluses and minuses of adding some of these inputs?
Where do we start?
Let's start with Epsom salt, because that's one that's kind of, controversial. What exactly Epsom salt will do for is it, essential for that terpene production? Is it giving the plant structure, making the calcium more available? Why exactly do we have Epsom salt? Hmm?
The boo from Smiley. I want to hear what he has to say.
I don't, so it's not my topic to go over.
So the magnesium sulfate is really what you're looking for from the Epsom salt. That's one of the key components that, if I'm trying to do a quick magnesium because I'm starting to have a deficiency in my plants. I'm using like a tablespoon per gallon of magnesium salt, or Epsom salt.
There's a question in chat: is Epsom salt even organics?
My thought on the Epsom salt is that's a correction for a solution where if you had a proper
Ooh, shots fired.
that's my thought on it. I understand it is an easy and simple and soluble correction, but let's get our soils right first.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer.
Doesn't salts
It's a
kill
very potent
some
input.
of your biology?
Like, it's a pretty potent input, and it's pretty water soluble. You should keep that in mind.
Well, and if I remember, salt does kill some of your biology, and not necessarily destroy it all, but it will cause some harm to some of the beneficials. And so you don't want to use a lot of it.
I'll tell you what, take that teaspoon of Epsom salt and put it in a little bit of water and stick your finger in it for 20 minutes and see how your finger comes out. That's what you're doing to biology in that soil.
Well, and so we talk about doing it as even a foliar spray, which it's very beneficial, but don't forget the phytosphere around your leaf. There's a lot of biology on your leaves. That is the salt killing the phytosphere or some of it? Is it preventing the plant from uptaking and taking stuff in like it needs to, doing that? Like, that's not any conversation I've heard people talk about or discuss in all the lectures that I've listened to. So that's a question that I'm still waiting for a real answer on.
Listen, is it in an oxidized form too? So like the salt form. So it'd be, have an effect too on certain things. So I don't know. It's not exactly one I get it, because I still maintain the idea that like there's a balance you want to try to maintain between that calcium and magnesium. So what you're seeing may not be, exactly what you're trying to go after. So if you're adding a really potent edge of something like, with sulfur and magnesium there, and you're throwing something like that into the soil that can dramatically change what's going on in there in a short fashion. So that would be my only caution.
So is langbeinite a better choice than Epsom salt because it's an organic derivative, even though it's salt? It's
still the water soluble portion was like 22% or some shit on the potassium side.
Yeah.
So you gotta watch, you just gotta pay attention to what it is and what you're putting in, and do it in proportion. I'm not poo-pooing it. I don't personally use it. I'm not saying against it. I'm just saying my experience with it has been pretty potent thing.
Also, let me say, I think a lot of the benefit we see from it is maybe not recognized as coming from the sulfur, especially given that sulfur is a huge part of that protein synthesis process, and you need that 10-to-1 ratio between nitrogen and sulfur to develop amino acids so you can go on to protein synthesis, right? So I think that might be a more important factor when we use Epsom salt, and maybe again we're deficient in both sulfur and magnesium. And Smiley's point is very much on point between the calcium and magnesium balance. Those two are some of the most core components in any soil, right? Like calcium is one of the most used and most difficult to mobilize nutrients in soil, right? If you're building truly healthy plants, every single cell wall in that plant is going to be made of calcium. That's going to give it that structure and that durability, just like you're pouring a
for cell division, you have to have magnesium.
Yes.
Your cells are not going to divide and multiply and get good growth without magnesium. So, there are different sources of magnesium. It doesn't have to be Epsom salts or langbeinite. There are actual organic parts of magnesium that you can find in different amendments. It may not be as high, but it's a better choice than maybe some of the salt choices.
Goose123 would like to know what's the last week he should stop adding insect grass.
Usually I stop around day 45. So that's probably like week 5 into 6. Depends on how long you take your plants. Some people go 10 weeks, some people go 8 weeks. So it really depends on how long you run your plants. But the insect frass is basically chitinase with some biology to the poop. And a lot of people even use it as a foliar spray, but I try to just end all amendment uptake, or try to get my soil to have less nutrients as the plant's finishing. So really 35 day on, my plant's starting to go into finish mode. I'm not trying to add a lot at that point. My last true amendment feeding for my plants, like a tea feeding, is day 45. That means I have another 15 plus days for it to consume that liquid fertilizer I just put in there. And most of it might be consumed by the biology more than the plant. But that's about the last time I really tried to feed my plants before they finish up.
Yep. And the only time that I feed any closer than that to the end of anything is like if I'm really trying to push a plant that it's already sort of deficient. Maybe I'll come in with a foliar feed, maybe as close as 7 days prior to harvest. But that is a very targeted feed or very specific nutritional deficiencies that I've spotted. And again, I'm 3 weeks late already at that point.
So you talk about, extra nutrients being available after certain weeks, 3 to 4 and stuff like that. I believe there shouldn't be excesses in there as well, but do you not believe the plant itself's in somewhat control of, the uptake itself? I mean, at which point do we, not think of this as a remixable super soil and like think of it as you guys kind of will lean toward, taking it more towards building beds. If I'm going to use it again, well, I'm going to want some excess nitrogen and whatever left in there. So is the plant not in control at all in the later weeks? I mean, in your opinion, it's still going to suck up anything it can suck up? There's no intelligence to, I need this, I need that, I'm done, I'm gonna fucking start drinking just water, you guys, no?
Here's the key thing to really tell, okay? When your plants are finishing, your plants should be fading. If you still have leaf that are green when you are finishing, you have too much nitrogen in your soil. End of story. Yep. Nitrogen is what helps with a lot of the chlorophyll, keeping the green in your plants. Your plants should be fading I'm trying to think the right term for it. The cyans, the color changing, like the purple leaves and the anthocyanins in your plants, they should be becoming more dominant at the end of everything.
Yep. You should, the plant as it's going into senescence should be burning up whatever nutrient.
Senescence, that's the word I was looking for. Yep. And you see that in Mother Nature. When plants are finishing up, they fade. They don't have excess green to the plants. The leaves are fading and dying. It happens to your trees. It happens to most of your shrubs. It happens to your cannabis plants. That's how it really tells me if you have too much nitrogen. And it's a bad thing because I don't think you're getting the production or the quality with the terpenes or the flavonoids that your plant can produce at that time. So I think it's a hindrance, but I don't think your plant has some control over it, but I think the biology is also part of it, because your plant's going to say, hey, I need this. Well, if there's a lot of excess of nitrogen and it's still calling just for trace amounts of nitrogen, it's going to take up whatever nitrogen that's there.
Absolutely. And again, what we're trying to do when we mix up a soil or make a soil profile or build a soil profile is really kind of like, we're trying to like work with an equalizer, right? We're trying to get our levels like in balance in relation to each other, and that can be tricky, and I think Smiley was doing soil testing, weren't you, Smiley?
Yeah, well, there's difference between like what we're talking about with a super soil versus like And that's always been designed to be like one run and done kind of thing, you know. So the idea behind it was, in my mind's eye, was like you're composting a certain amount of metered nutrients into a batch that you're gonna let sit for the 90 days, right? Go through this cycle, and then you're gonna put the plants in, and these nutrients are gonna be readily available, like they would be in a, you know, much like a compost would be, you know, where we're like in a recycling system or an ongoing system where you're going to constantly use that soil. You really, the goal in my thought would be is you're going to be trying to establish the soil food web, which is going to cycle the nutrients for the plant and in a continual basis. So like Eagle's saying, yeah, the plant does have some control there, right? Because that soil food web is going to be happening the whole time the plant's happening, right? But where you can disprove that, or is the fact that I could add alfalfa at, like, say, week 4, right? And you're going to notice a difference in the final flower from the time before when you didn't add that. And that's another indicator that, well, maybe the plant isn't necessarily fully in control, because now it's doing something different with this different amendment in there, you know. So there are some different, I don't think it's cut and dried, you know what I'm saying, like, oh, it's fully in control or not. I think it does have some control to what's happening, but it also is influenced by the environment or the input.
I think that's an excellent illustration. And when you really think about it, it's like any other biological interaction, right? Like, you don't have any exchange with another biological organism that is all strictly on your terms, right? Their terms are included in that exchange. So that kind of makes sense from the natural system standpoint.
Yeah, I don't know if 2 hours was not long enough. In the future, should this be 3? Maybe.
No. I think 2 hours is good to give it a time to kind of stop, let everybody absorb all the information. Because if I listen to something longer than 2 hours, because there's shows that go longer than that, I lose a lot of that information from the 2 hours previous in the third and fourth hour. So it makes it hard to retain a lot of this information, especially if you want to go back and watch the video. Oh my God, I got 4 hours. I got to go re-listen to and find what they were talking about.
Also, I agree, but you know, the thing about this is I would like for the weed nerds to learn a lot, as well as myself. But at the same time, I want to try to involve as many as the weed nerds as possible. So I kind of would like, you know, even though we've kind of skipped through it tonight, at some point I would like to make it available for weed nerds to pop on and ask a question. You know what I mean? Couple at a time, one at a time, and that they can get their question answered as thoroughly as possible, because it's not always easy to, you know, once you have that aha moment, get in touch with some folks, go, all right, what did you exactly mean here? And then maybe even rebut. So in the future, I wouldn't mind at least some part of the show where we can get the weed nerds on, and, you know, if they have a valid question, you know.
Well, I've had people reach out to me on Instagram as well. Hey, I've got a question. Can you help me? And I have no problem responding to questions or helping answers or pointing them into the research that I found. Like, that's never been a problem. So if anybody has any questions, you don't want to wait till the next show or whatever, feel free to ask. Like, don't be afraid.
For sure. But I also like the idea of, like, you know, if people have like more in-depth questions of bringing that forward and kind of vetting those pathways out, that might be an easier way to kind of cover the more in-depth details of the topic.
Sometimes it is easy to skip, you know, I'm sure we've skipped over a lot of shit tonight. You know what I mean? To where a valid question here and there could help fill some of the gaps.
Well, and we don't want to get too scientific to keep some of the new people away from it. You know, like Nick from Rooted Leaf is a fucking genius to me when it comes to putting out some of this information, but he's on such a high level of intellectual conversation. most people can't understand what he's talking about.
He's a good one. He so calmly talks, and he wants you to understand it. He is such a great source.
But that's the one thing. Like him and Matthew Gates is another example. You need to dumb down the information for people to be able to absorb it and take it in. Because when you keep putting out big intellectual words and people have a hard time understanding it, what did he say? I don't know what that is. Now, they're kind of shutting off to some of the information, and that's not what we're trying to do. So keeping that balance of putting enough intellectual conversation to keep the people like me and you guys on the panel and some of the people in chat interested in the conversation, as well as the new people trying to learn, I think that's a big balance we got to try to find in some of these conversations, because a lot of us go over the heads of some of these newbies and what's that? I've not heard of that.
Well, not everybody listens to this kind of stuff at 2X while they work.
So with that being said, I guess, if you have any questions or topics that you would like to see covered in future episodes, feel free to leave those in the comments section below, or hit one of us up with a show idea. 100%.
Carbon chelation, man, that was already in there. I seen it.
Senescence inhibitors, I thought, was another good question right there. Of course, Envy wants to see fucking more puppies before we go. We've seen 2 of 7.
Oh, we're going to show a puppy that might be from Envy's dog. But I was keeping him and my dog was in heat.
There you go.
Senescence inhibitors, I would say cobalt's a really good one. Very, very.
So this is a chocolate looking puppy, and he has a dark chocolate looking dog.
Yeah, that's too adorable.
And this one, it just reminds me so much of his dog Chocolate that I was like, did his dog get my dog? But my female, her mom, that's a pit bull, that could be the pit bull coming out of her. But it just looks too much like his dog that I'm like, oh, you might have a grandchild.
Yeah. How old are they?
Almost 6 weeks old.
6. You got homes for them, or are you still trying to find homes?
Still trying to find some homes for them. I've got a couple people that want some. I'm probably going to keep one of them. It looks like my dog that died, that was Pepe's dad. So it makes me really hard to get rid of that one.
You're still in Colorado, right?
Yeah.
So there you go, Dan. Anybody wants some puppies, hit them up.
In Colorado with some puppies.
Yeah.
Let me grab another one real quick.
Envy said his dog didn't do it.
Not mine. It wasn't me. That's funny. They are cute though, man. I love puppies. They're adorable.
This one, she is feisty little girl. She's a runt of the litter, one of them. There's a couple that are just her size, but she's a good mix of her dad and mom. Like, she's getting the tick marks coming in from her mom, but she's got the tricolor Merle and blues from her daddy. And it looks like she's getting a partial blue eye from Aussie.
It's like pheno hunting.
Oh my gosh, so many different phenos, right?
It literally is. I mean, like in a real sense, like you're picking between the different.
I have a friend.
He's in the litter, right? Like,
yeah.
Some of the stuff she's awesome.
You have an ideal keeper. I mean, I've had a lot of litters, and I don't know. I've always ended up like one out of every that I just couldn't part with. And 9 times out of 9, it's what we'd all probably consider the runt. So do you have are you a runt keeper? Do you got to protect out for the little one, or?
So surprisingly, Pepe, my male, he was the runt of his litter. He is a miniature Aussie mix. His dad had just a tiny bit of husky to him, but 3/4 Australian Shepherd, and his mom was full Australian Shepherd. But Pet Star, she was actually the runt of her litter. I didn't choose her. That was the only female left of that litter. And she was just a gorgeous little girl, so I didn't have any problems keeping them. But these runts here, oh no, they're the aggressors. They are showing dominance over these other dogs. Like, you're not going to push me around. It's comical.
So you got interest in the chat. Where should somebody hit you up to see the dog, man?
Instagram is a better place to just hit me up because YouTube don't really have messaging anymore
It's
like
just
it used
medically
to.
fit, right? Or is there like an underscore or some shit? No, it's just
Nope, medically fit, all one word like you see it here.
There you go. We're getting rid of some dogs tonight.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't mind that. Every so often we need a little push when it comes to puppies, and I know I've had a few litters going, man, where's a good resource I might be able to find great homes for these dogs?
Well, and people ask, what am I asking for these dogs? And I've looked around at some of the pricing, and like Pepe's litter, we sold each of his brother and sisters for $1,200. The litter before that, we sold them for $600. Well, why did I go up $600 on the second litter? Because I wanted them to go to excellent homes. And if you couldn't afford $1,200 for that dog, it didn't need to go to your house. And that's the way I look at some of, like, hey, I got this $1,000 cut, this clone. You want it? It's $10,000. Oh, it's kind of like you're saying you have the top of the line shit. And so you want to make sure it's going to a good home, and the people that can afford that, that's where it's going. That's kind of how I look at my animals. I want to, if I believe that it's a good litter and they're good pups, that I'm going to charge more because I want them to go to a good home. To me, if you give somebody a dog, they're going to abuse it. They're going to get rid of it. They didn't pay nothing for it.
Some people, man, there's certain people that you give them a dog, they're going to love that shit.
Kids are ones that will love that dog.
Adults too, man. I mean,
Yeah.
Also take a dog. They're a blessing for sure. I got 3 of them, so we got my dog Stella. She's like she's gonna be 13 in November. So I'm trying to think now. Maybe it's 12, but either way, she's getting pretty old. She's slowing down. Her hips are getting stiff, or like she'll walk a few steps and like where her back right leg will kind of like fall out from under her or whatever, and she kind
Have
of
you tried
she rolls
CBD?
with it and just like sits down and shit. Oh yeah, we give her all kinds of CBD, and like she's actually a stoner dog, so like we sit outside smoking a joint, she's funny. She'll go person to person, but then she'll like, I don't know, at a certain point she's just like, all right, that's good, and she'll go lay down and just fucking chill. So like, yeah, she definitely is the stoner dog. It's funny. She likes the RSO and shit. That gets her moving a little bit. And Jessica, my fiance, like does all the work of making her food, and so she cooks the food gives her all kinds of shit in there for hips and bones and joints and all this and stuff that she adds to it. It's all different, but yeah, she once or twice a month she makes some food or whatever, so she gets like a couple weeks worth. Yeah.
Well, is that CBD even helping her like move around and mobility?
Oh yeah, that's the only reason she's alive, man. Like, because I mean, I was always feeding her like a bag food or whatever. Like, we try to buy the best dog food. I forget what it was, like Science Diet or whatever it was. No, it was Eukanuba. That was the one I was using. But yeah, and then I don't know. She develops like these like lumps and shit, and like I've seen other dogs get that too from them. But yeah, Jessica started doing the dog food. She actually like, gets real fucking chicken and real turkey and like, mixes rice and with it.
Real food for dogs is better than this dried ass dog food we feed them.
Yeah,
Like,
and just ground up zucchini in there and like all kinds of shit goes. I mean, it's a huge thing she does, or huge ordeal she does to make their 2-week supply of food or whatever. But I think that's why our dog's alive still. So
I looked into D3 K2 supplementation for him too if he's got hip problems, back problems.
yeah, I mean, all things considered, I've seen other dogs that have really had it, and she's not anywhere near that. She can still get out and move around, and it's only like certain times where you just see her and all of a sudden, it, boom, it goes out on her or whatever. So she's in the early stages of that shit. But yeah, we were talking to the vet about it, but you know, the vet's like, hey, she still eats her food every day, right? So she can still go outside and go to the bathroom on her own, and she still gets excited and happy, like, so, like, you know what I mean? We can get her riled up and play a little tug of war or whatever, you know? She can still do some shit. So.
They're living a good life.
Yep. Yeah. Her eyes are getting cloudy and all that, so you can tell she's an old dog, but, you know.
Oh, and like me, I try to feed my dogs human food. Like if I cook a steak or chicken, I save some just to put it in their food. So it's not always the dry, nasty food that they get. I even give them Greek yogurt, which has probiotics to it for their guts. They love that. My dogs love flake coconut stuff that they want. I give it to them every morning to help with their electrolytes and stuff. Like my dogs as puppy used to eat a lot of fruits. They won't even fucking touch that shit no more. What's that? They'd rather have the steak and the chicken over any fruit. But my male dog, he's weird because I'll make asparagus and I'll lightly cook it in butter and salt. That dog will eat the shit out of it. But when it's raw, won't touch it.
Yeah, my old dog, like last year we had cherry tomatoes. This year I didn't have them in the garden where she could get to them, but last year she'd walk right up to that cherry tomato and just sit there and eat like 5-6 of them right off the plant, like just, you know, like they were like candy for her or whatever. I was like, whatever. Yeah. But she gets all kinds of veggies. She's pretty good with it.
Well, boys, we're hitting up on that 9 o'clock hour. I would like to, if you're interested in hearing, like to share a little bit of cannabis and puppy story there. You know, a lot of small dogs are diabetic. I don't know if a lot of people realize that or not, but I have 3 dogs myself that are very small dogs and do suffer. Not all of them suffer from diabetic experiences, but some of them have, you know, throughout the breeds through the years. You know, there's generally probably, I'd say 1 out of every litter that suffers from some type of diabetic problem or seizures. And, you know, it's always tough to sit and watch or go through. I mean, especially, I mean, if you've ever been around a human, you know, anybody that's ever gone through a seizure, it's super tough to sit back and watch what's going on. And we talk about a lot of how cannabis can help our pets and whatnot, but I've actually seen this several times, so I can speak to the effectiveness of it. Now, I've seen one of my dogs, little buddy, you've kind of seen throughout the years, here and there pop up in the background, but he is one that does suffer from seizures. And it wasn't too long ago that he did have a seizure, and under the diligence of Miss 11 Smiles 11 back here, we noticed him going into the seizure, and she immediately yells at me to grab my weed! Explanation point. So I grabbed the joint that we were smoking on, and she fires it up, and she gets right down into his face and blows a couple of hits in his nose, which immediately snapped him out of the seizures. Followed up with some CBD moments later, almost like it never even happened, which never had I've seen Buddy go through these instances many times before. It never have I ever seen him snap in and out of a seizure that quickly with little to no effects on the back end of it. I mean, each time this technique has been applied during one of these seizure events, I mean, minutes later, he's back up and around like nothing ever happened. So if you do have a small dog with seizures, you might want to think about, you know, the next time he's suffering, using your cannabis a little bit. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about, you know, just the giving of the CBD for pain and, you know, whatnot. But, you know, cannabis does have a place as a medical benefit with our animals. So don't discount that shit.
Well,
cannabinoids.
We're not the only ones that benefit from it. We're not the only ones.
listen, here's something that if you haven't done, you need to try. Because I did it not realizing I did it. And then my now ex-girlfriend, girlfriend at the time was like, what the fuck did you do to my dog? He looks fucking drunk. So I took a bunch of stems and I baked my stems, decarboxylating them, and let the dogs eat the big long stems from trimming my plant. It got my dog so intoxicated just by heating and decarboxylating the stem. The dog was comatose, sleeping, and looked drunk when he was up trying to walk around for a while. She was not happy with me, but I thought it was so hysterical. I didn't think about that when I baked everything and was decarboxylating to make some butter. And oops.
You got to think of their weight too. Yeah, definitely dose appropriately if it's a real little dog. And the THC really does affect dogs a lot more than it does you. So even though you could take such and such dose, you should really pay attention to what you're giving your animal for sure.
It's funny, my friend Lucy in Spain, oftentimes her dog will go out on the patio and like steal a couple of leaves on her, and like go off and like eat them and like be, very happy the rest of the day.
Yeah, and then like a little, if your dog's 2 pounds, like, you know what I'm saying? You're not going to give it the same dose as a dog that's 60 pounds or whatever. So like, it's good. But it's 9 o'clock. What'd you have at 9 o'clock? I see something you got highlighted there with Dizzy.
Pedro and Dizzy's on at 9 o'clock over on their channel.
All right.
Rideables, I believe, is what they're calling it. So I'm done with this. Slide over and check out Pedro and Dizzy. We've got a lot of love for them. And Med, I consider you medically fit. I consider you to be along that line too of some of the original YouTubers that have laid a lot of the foundation for the shit we do today. So Pedro, Dizzy, if you're still listening, probably not because it's 9:04. Medically fit, MV Closet Grower, man, I got a lot of respect for you guys. Helping out on the channel, being in my chat. Every time I see you guys just fucking pop through my chat, I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah.
Well, it's
Fuck
like
yeah.
a lot of people remember GrowTube Roundtable,
Absolutely.
but I was on YouTube before that shit was even around. And that's where some of the people that know me originally from being on here for over 10 years, like, holy shit, bro, he's been on here for 10 years doing videos
I
and
said that
putting out
last
content.
I said that last night, man. Like when I started researching, I'm gonna mix my own soil. What am I gonna do? You start researching the shit online, and then you find different recipes. Like like we presented. There's definitely different ways to do it. And your channel was the one I found where you went through all the different amendments, and you like literally went through all the. Here's this box of fucking shit from down to earth, and this is what's in it, and this is what you're looking for, this is what you're trying to do with it, and like, so that was like a cool breakdown back in the day that I remembered, but that had to go back 9 years at least. Like,
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand. Like, I've always tried to make educational information. I got a lot of haters out there. All your plants are doing is in recovery. My channel is all about showing you if your plants get sick, deficient, bug infested, how to recover from that. I've already shown all of the good growing. I mean, look at my organic sunlight greenhouse garden. My plants were over 11 foot tall and 8 foot wide and monster plants, but nobody remembers that because they don't go back far enough.
I just want to say, if you haven't checked out Medically Fit's recent videos, he's taking sick plants and bringing them back. You should go check them out because it's a great example of how epigenetic environmental.
Every other word of that, brother.
Yeah, you were cutting in and out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that's some of the things like people don't understand. I did a video series called The Shittiest Plants on YouTube. Plants I got from my friend. They weren't mine. He's had them. They were neglected. He was going to throw them away. He wasn't going to grow for a while because he had a lot going on in his life. And I'm like, let me take them. I'll keep them around. I'll get them healthy. And, you know, I'll get clones off of them. So if you want one, I'll have it ready for you. And that's what I did. I showed it as a series. And, oh, your plants are horrible. Look at you. They're just always... Dude, you don't get the understanding of my channel. So that's okay. I know I'm doing something right when I got the amount of haters hating on me and other channels creating videos talking shit about me. I know I'm doing something right.
Hey, talking shit's not always a bad thing. Just
No.
saying.
Bad publicity is still good publicity. It brings people to me to get some real information.
Right. Well, I do appreciate you guys coming on and helping spreading the knowledge continuously after all these years. Well, I want to do give a big thank you to the Pharmacy Seed Network, Carlton, for, you know, putting this out here, giving me a DM and going, hey man, let's do an organic episode. Let's do some organic shit. Let's get back to the teaching side. So thank you, my friend, for helping me light that fire. And I, you know, looking forward to see where this endeavor goes.
So the question is, Eagle, is this going to be like a every Friday, once a Friday month? What are you trying to do with this? So everybody in the chat hears what you're trying to do.
Right now, I think we've got it at every other Friday. If there is a need or a want for an every Friday episode, I would step it up 100%. But for now, I don't want to burn everybody out. You know what I mean? I want to try to keep this fresh and something that everybody looks forward to, not necessarily like, you know, a thing. So for right now, every other week, if we, you know, we want to fucking step it up and, you know, we can't keep up with the demand of the questions, yeah, I'll be willing to go every week with you guys, 100%.
Envy, you're not right. Bro. Envy in the chat real quick. Ask Medically Fit about his friend, the Grow Boss. He has so much fun and love for him. I miss the Grow Boss. He hasn't been around in like 7-8 months. He was another channel that was trying to educate people on some stuff and being a hater at the same time. But, you know, everybody brings attention. Like when you drop names, it brings attention to these channels. So if you want to be where you don't talk about these channels, don't ever drop a name. Don't ever mention them. Don't ever speak about them. But if you do, it's going to bring people to their attention. But there are a lot of good people out here on those channels that aren't all haters. So we can't, you know, be mad at everybody out there.
He's definitely a character, man. He's one of them love him, hate him guys, but he's one good, you know, to give him a credit, he has accumulated a lot of people and he puts out a lot of information. So whether you agree with it or not, you know, there's a lot of people that do follow him and do like it. And I like that because that means there's more people growing, and more people growing weed. We're gonna overgrow this planet, and that's a good thing. So like, I don't know.
The more different versions of it, the bigger the picture we can paint of like the spectrum, right?
Oh, and we all don't grow the same. We all have different grow methodologies and styles. Each of us on this panel grow differently, even though some of it's organically and super soil. It may be different recipes. It may be veg time. It may be like how we, you know, the spectrum or we all grow differently. That's it. And a lot of people hate on people for how they grow. Why can't we all just get along in this industry? Whether we grow organic, synthetic, like we're all trying to educate each other on cultivating either one method or the other. And I've seen people grow fire from both. Like I can't say one's better than the other. And I know. Go ahead.
I think that's part of why we're doing this too, is to paint that picture like that. Hey, you know, there is a wide spectrum of ways of doing things and ways of balancing things, right? Like super important.
And that's a great point though, but man, just to reiterate, like growing weed is better than nobody growing weed. So like more people who got growing weed, it don't matter the way they're doing it, you know what I'm saying? And don't matter who they emulate or what style they're using, as long as they're growing, that's key, because that's what we need is more people growing weed for themselves and keeping that right in more states to be able to do that, you know.
Well, and here's the thing. there's times that I haven't been growing because I moved back to Iowa for a little bit. There's times like the grow boss, he's not growing, or there's times that people had to take their grows down to move or deal with some shit. It's fucking life, man. And you want to hate on people, oh, you're not growing. Why are you trying to educate cultivated weed? Because I'm an educator and I can, and I have the information and knowledge to share to people. And that's one thing that people don't get. You don't always have to be growing weed at the time that you're trying to educate people, but why do you want to hate on people because they're not growing at that time? You know, it's like doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's really like the depth of knowledge is really like down through multiple people. So like to think that like just because you're not working on it right now, that you've just stopped working on that lifelong degree of getting better knowledge is just kind of really ridiculous.
Well, you know, some people, oh, we got newbie growers out here. They don't need to know that education. Listen, I was a newbie. I wanted more education. I wanted to continue to know how to grow the best possible cannabis I can for myself. So I had to dive into listening to people talk about stuff I didn't know anything about. I had to start learning it to know what they were talking about. How else do you improve on cultivating over the years? But listening, educating, trial and error, fucking shit up, and getting them healthy.
Yep.
Absolutely. I've always changed, man. Ever since I started growing, it's always kind of, I don't know, it's been a constant like tweaking or adjustment, or, you know, I originally was in cocoa and you know, running house and garden and running, you know, you go to the, what's the one I'm thinking of? Nectar for the Gods. You know, you go, oh, I'm going to do organic. I do Nectar for the Gods. And then you figure out, oh, that shit's all made from bone meal. And I can just get this fucking bag of bone meal. And then you start figuring out how you're going to mix that, you know, and it's all a progression. But that's the joy of it, is when you're starting out, you want to learn all that. And that's the thing. You should listen to all kinds of different people. And you should get an idea from different perspectives, and you're going to start hearing repetition and things, and then you'll start to go, oh, okay, I start to get this, I start to get that. And some of the shit starts to make sense, but you should listen to shit that's over your head, you know? Because then the more you try, the more you start to click, you know what I'm saying?
That's why I love listening to Nick from Rooted Leaf.
Yeah,
that shit is.
He's talking over your head. You gotta rewind it and listen to it a second time. Maybe you gotta look up what a word fucking means. You know what I mean? Maybe you said a word you don't know. Now you gotta look up a new word. You learned a new word. You know, and some of that's not bad, right? So that's why you listen to shit that's over your head, because even if you listen to it twice or three times, it starts to click. You know, you start to go, oh, now I get it. You know, this is the third time hearing it, but now it makes sense. You know, I don't know why, but
well, and look at some of our favorite YouTube growers or people that we learned from, like Subcool. Subcool, what? Lost his shit in a fire. Had to fucking start all over, move to a fucking different state to even start growing again. And then what happened? He was growing again. People snitched on him for all his plans. He had to fucking tear it down. Like, listen, people go through shit. Look at Medicropper. If you guys didn't know who Medicropper was, he was on YouTube before I was. And he was putting out shit. And that dude went through a lot of tough times over his years of growing on YouTube and educating people.
Medicropper's been on. I've done an episode with Medicropper.
See?
That was an honor, to be honest with you. Medicropper was an honor. I couldn't believe I nailed that one down. That was a hard one to nail down too. That took a little bit of work.
But look at those people that we've all looked up to, that like are my people that I look up to. You know, like, oh my God, most of these people did go through trouble and hard times. They lost crops to fucking bug infestations. They talked about it. Oh my, you know, they warned people how to try to prevent and not bring pests into your house, like changing your clothes before you go in your grow rooms, or washing shit, and don't let your pets go in and out of those areas because they carry all the mites and everything on. Like, oh shit. All these people went through the same shit most of us are going through at one point in time. So why do we got all these haters? Haven't the haters been through the same problems we're going through at one point in their life? No? Oh, you will. Give it time.
It's like badges on your fucking cadet scarf or whatever. Like, oh, I got this badge. No, man, I'm mite badge.
I got my rusted mite badge. I got my spider mite badge. I got my calcium magnesium deficiency badge. Yeah, that's what it's like, right?
Yes, and that's not just that's like for each plant that you grow, whether like cannabis, tomato, corn, each variety has its own set that goes with it. So like, I know we're talking in the context of cannabis, but that like each one has its own little learning course about what it wants, likes, when, timing, pieces, parts, all that.
Yeah, and there's more names getting dropped in chat like TL Rev and Coop. Everybody's had issues learning and trial and error and fucking shit up to figure out what works and doesn't.
Yep.
So 3 hours. Next round.
If we're doing 3 hours, give me
It's
10
almost
minutes.
20, right? Like that's what we're like smoking already, but
You guys are awesome.
But this is great. I mean, like people in this industry, these newbies that come in here and hate on a bunch of us old G's. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't think you guys really understand some of the education that these people have that have taught us that we're trying to teach you. And you're saying we don't know shit. Well, then you need to tell the people that taught us that shit, because I'm pretty sure you're not going to be disrespectful to Subcool and say, oh, you didn't know shit, because somebody's going to smack the shit out of you for disrespecting them, especially a true subby fan that grew up loving what he was doing and his genetics. Like,
so this is what did you say? This was a weekly thing? It's an every Friday thing?
Wow. It's starting to look like a weekly thing. Yeah, we can't. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of cover here.
So then what's the next episode then? We're going to go through the different nutrients, or are we leading into the soil food web, or are we going to talk, fungal
Eagle.
present?
Eagle. Envy's a little upset. He's in chat a little upset.
We didn't need to get it all in one night. We can go different specific topics. If we're going to be weekly. I'm just saying, if it's going to be a weekly thing, we might want to slow that down a little. Take that a little piece by piece type. You know what I mean?
I think every other week is a good, like next week, do it more based upon your original show and hanging out and talking maybe synthetics with some synthetic growers and getting that information out and just rotating every other week. Hey. No. They were talking about this. Can you guys kind of counteract some of the information they're discussing?
Sounds like you're just trying to reignite the no-till war. That's what that sounds like.
That's going to be a
never for the plan. Now we're dividing them up again.
That's a never-ending battle, because organic growers are going to say we grow better than fucking bottled nutrients, and bottled nutrients saying you guys can't grow like us, and it's that never-ending competition. I've seen Envy grow synthetic organic grows and win fucking cups with this flower. I've seen the Dude Grow show. They held a cup that some of the winners of that were bottled nutrients. I'm trying to think of what it was. I can't think of the name right offhand. But then you had some of the winners that won with like no-till living soil type shit. So it's all over the spectrum on everybody that's winning. So you can't say really one's better than the other, even though we try.
You know we can.
I think the science will continue to prove out where we're going here.
It is, and
even though we can tell.
Yeah, well, the science is proving it.
Yeah, a lot of science proving it, and it's in public domain now, right on YouTube. You can go listen to it.
And the research papers that is on Google Scholar that you can look up on what different, force feeding, high fucking salt, what they're doing to your fucking biology and your plants. And it's the information's there. That's why I try to point people, listen, I'm trying to turn you on to the information. It's your turn to go look it up to disprove if I'm wrong or not. Because when you look up the information, you're going to find out 90% of the time I'm right. I might be wrong on a few things I misspoke about, but sometimes we do misspeak, just not understanding things fully yet.
Right on. So I think the next episode will be the 13th. Friday the 13th. October, Friday the 13th will be the next Organics episode. The next Wormhole 2.0.
The next episode.
Envy's in chat saying one of the cups was in a sterile DWC grow, pure synthetic shit. Like, yeah, like that's people win with that shit. Like, but you ask him how he's growing now, it's not full synthetic. Is it, Envy?
We all evolve, right? I like to think we all evolve.
It doesn't matter. I was just messing around. It's good. Just grow weed. However you want to do it, just grow weed.
See how easily that fire ignites, though? I mean, seriously, you can get a blow on it or dunk gas on it or nothing. All you gotta do is light the match. Must be the salts in the air that are so flammable.
Yeah, so that oxidize the nutrients, I guess.
All right, boys. Hard ending this time. Thank you, Medically Fit, Smiley's Gardens, the Pharmacy Seed Network. You guys are awesome, man. Super smart. That's why I chose you guys to fucking hang out tonight. Can't thank you guys enough.
Hey, thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Honored to be part of this.
Right on.
Always a good time, amigo.
Thank you guys one last time. Again, October 13th will be the next episode of the Wormhole 2.0. If you guys have some ideas of what you'd like to see in that episode, or if you'd like to participate in that episode, please hit me up and we'll figure out what comes next. This will be a learning experience. It will evolve as it goes along. With that being said, the most important part, have a great weekend. Don't forget to do something nice for somebody. Random acts of kindness do save lives. And with that being said, one last thank you guys. Have a great weekend. That's an awesome dude right there. I got that 10 bag fucking sticker too. Hell yeah. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everybody. Have a good evening.
We're out.